Well, hello. And in this lesson, I want to give you my top 4 tips for the listening section. This is the best strategy for getting the answers that you need. In the listening section, you have 30 minutes to answer 40 questions. You get 1 point for each question. You don't lose any points for wrong answers. So your strategy is to get as many correct answers as possible to get the score that you need on the IELTS exam. So let's get started, and I'm going to share with you my top 4 tips for the listening section. And the top 4 tips are: 1, paying attention; number 2, pacing, where you control the pace and not have to worry about the speed of the recording; and predicting, how you can prepare to hear the correct answer for each question; and the final tip is practicing. So let's get started and go through each one of these in detail. We're going to start with paying attention. What this means is making sure that you take the time and are very careful to read and listen to the instructions. In the listening section, is you have the benefit of hearing the instructions and listening to them, as well as being able to read them. And there are different instructions for different types of questions, so you'll want to make sure that you pay careful attention to the task that you're asked to complete in the listening section. So as you listen to the instructions, another benefit that you'll receive is that you will hear an example, and you'll hear the accent and the person who's going to be speaking in the recording that you're listening to. So it will also give you a little time just to adjust to to the person's voice and accent that you're going to be hearing in the recording. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you underline the instructions that you read. So as you underline this, one of the benefits of doing this is to just simply make sure that you've read the instructions. You don't want to have the distraction of getting halfway through a set of questions and then having to recheck the instructions. For example, these instructions say you can use one word and or a number. So you don't want to get halfway through a set of questions and then have to remind yourself, am I allowed to use one word or 2 words? By underlining them, you're making it clear that you understand exactly how many words you're allowed to use and what you have to do as you answer these questions. And then as you listen, you'll also have a description of what the audio is about. You're going to have instructions and details about the recording itself. So what you want to make sure you do is just make a little note. For example, the instructions in this set of questions would tell me that I'm going to be listening for a conversation, and it's between 2 people, and they're arranging an interview at an agency. So I just want to simply make a little note in my next to the questions that tell me what the topic of the recording is. And now I'm fully prepared and I understand exactly what's going to be coming in this recording. So the first step is to always pay careful attention. And just another tip, reading and paying attention to the instructions throughout the entire IELTS exam in every section for every question type, whether it's reading or listening or even speaking and writing. Paying attention to the instructions and making sure that you're accomplishing the task you're asked to accomplish can increase your band score overall by a point, just by simply making sure you always take the time to pay attention to the instructions. So the second thing is the pacing. How can you actually control the pace and the speed of the recording? Well, obviously, you can't control the recording. But if you use these time management tips that I'm about to give you, you will be able to take more control of the timing and the pace of uh, the listening questions. So let me give you, first of all, you'll be given some time to look at the questions before you hear the recording. And this is another benefit of listening to the instructions. The instructions will say, you now have time to look at questions 1 to 5. So what you want to make sure, and this timing will be in the neighborhood of 30 seconds, on your page in front of you, you'll have 10 questions. Each part of the listening section, each recording has 10 questions. But in the instructions, you're told to look at questions 1 to 5. So don't waste time looking at all the questions. Only look at questions 1 to 5. And as you're looking at these 5 questions and preparing to answer them, you'll be able to have more time to clearly identify exactly what you're listening for. Don't go ahead and look at all the questions at this point, because you will be given more time to prepare for the other 5 questions in this part of the listening section. So just first of all, just take the time and look at only the questions that you're asked to listen to, because the recording will stop and you'll be given more time to prepare for the second part of the recording. And then you'll hear something that says, you will hear an example. When you hear, after you've looked at the questions and you've looked at questions 1 to 5 and you've prepared to answer them, you will hear an example. What's most important to do at this point is to relax. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where you'll get adjusted to the voice of the person who's doing the recording, so that you can get used to their accent and their voice. And it will also give you an idea of how to answer the questions, because it will show you the example and the answer and just give you a good idea of how to answer the rest of the questions. And if you're doing the paper-based test, I recommend that at this point, you put that pencil down, you relax, and you just listen carefully to the example. But this is the moment to take a breath and relax and prepare for the recording. At the end of the example, you will hear the words, "And now we shall begin." This is where you pick up your pencil, and now you're ready to start listening and answering. One of the reason I mentioned this, "and now we shall begin," you will always hear this before the actual recording where you have to start answering begins. So often you don't relax and you are a little bit nervous. This is the first set of questions that you're facing on the IELTS exam for that day. But be careful that you don't start trying to answer before the example is finished. That will get you off to a poor start. This is where you want to set the tone and prepare your mind and relax and get ready to start answering. So don't even think about writing in answers until you hear these words, "And now we shall begin," and then you get ready to go. What will happen is, as you're listening, you will listen to the first half of the recording, and you'll be answering the first 5 questions. As soon as you answer question number 5, Even if the recording isn't finished yet, this is where you start and move forward to question number 6 and start preparing and looking at questions 6 to 10. If you move forward immediately, as soon as you fill in the answer to number 5, if you move forward immediately, that may give you a few extra seconds and use that time for preparing. This is such an important strategy in the listening section of the IELTS exam. You always want to be moving forward. If you miss a question, you want to prepare for the next one. You don't want to get stuck on one question and overthinking of it. If you miss an answer, you miss an answer. Just keep moving forward. And once you do write an answer in, and you know that the end of the recording is coming up, just start thinking about the next set of questions and move forward and start preparing. So as soon as you write in the answer to number 5, it's almost like you don't have to listen to any more of that part of the recording. Just start preparing, because there is going to be a pause, and the next half of the questions will start after you've been given time. But if you move forward immediately, that may give you an extra 10 to 15 seconds, depending on how long the recording continues after you've answered number 5. But the key, that this is probably the most important strategy for the listening section, is to just keep moving forward. If you miss a question, you don't want to think about it anymore, because then you may miss the next question. And then at the end of a section of questions, you're going to hear and be given an opportunity to check your answers. And what I want to tell you at this point, don't bother. There's no advantage to checking your answers at this point. And you will hear, you now have time to check your answers. There's nothing you can check. You're not going to hear the recording a second time. The only thing you could possibly check is spelling, if you're writing in words, and you don't want to go back and waste time trying to think of what you might have heard. And so there is really no way to check your answers. This time is better used to move to the next section of the listening test and start preparing and looking at your questions for the next set, for the next recording. So don't take the time to check your answers at this point. I will mention here, and this is an important thing to realize about the listening section, while you're answering questions to the listening section, you are writing the answers in the notebook that you're given. At the end of the reading section, at the listening section, you are given 10 minutes to transfer your answers from your notebook to the answer sheet. This is the time that you use to check your spelling and things that you can check. So while you're in the midst of the test, never take the time to check your answers. Do that while you're transferring your answers from your notebook to your answer sheet. The time is much better used preparing for the next set of questions. So keep moving forward. Don't go back and check your answers. Prepare for the next set of questions. And if you miss an answer, don't panic. Remember, your goal is to get as many correct as possible out of 40. And if you miss an answer, you don't lose a point. Okay, you won't get the point, but you also won't be deducted any points for wrong answers. And the problem is, if you keep thinking about an answer that you're missed, you may end up missing the next one because you're not focused and moving forward. So keep moving forward. Always focus on the next question, and don't allow yourself to be distracted, and don't panic if you miss an answer. If you panic over a missed answer, there's a good chance that you'll be too busy panicking and you'll miss the next one too. So don't turn one mistake into two mistakes by worrying about the answer that you missed. Now, one important thing about the listening section is, what do you do when you have this time to prepare? What do you do during that time where it says you have time to look at questions 1 to 5? What do you do to prepare for that, for answering the questions? And this is where you use the keyword strategy for the listening section. And I want to explain what you do. And this is where you underline and mark keywords that will help you identify the answers you need as you're listening. So let's go through this together. I want to show you 3 that are especially important. First of all, always mark the names of people or places. These are often the best clues for helping you follow along in the recording, and will help you find the answers you need. And you may want to use different markings for different things. I suggest maybe circling names. Every time you see a proper name, circle it. And in this case, we have the name of a town and the name of a person. And in this case, you'll be asked to write the last name in of the person. And I just another little tip for listening: whenever you have to write out a proper name in the recording, they'll always spell it out to you letter by letter. So there's no worries about misspelling proper names. They'll always be spelt for you. Common words will not be spelt for you. So in that case, spelling will be important, but you can check your spelling again when you're transferring your answers during that 10 minutes at the end of the listening test. So always mark names. Names are always important when it comes to key words. Another important one is being aware of dates and times. And again, I just to have a different kind of marking for dates and times, I might put a box around these types of answers. And I'm going to give you a clue when it comes to dates and times, and it's the use of prepositions. So if you're not aware of prepositions, one of the things that you might want to brush up on is your prepositions of time. For example, in question number 2, it says the best time to call her in the. When we see the preposition in, when it comes to time, we know that it's going to be a time of day. In the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening. If it had been the preposition at, then we know it's going to be a specific time, at 4 p.m., at 10 p.m., at 7 a.m. And if we saw on, we could see that it would be on Monday or on the weekend. Sometimes in the UK, they say at the weekend. It depends. That's another reason for this, maybe listening to the accent that you're hearing in the recording. If you saw in without the word the, then it could be a month or a year. In January, in 1992. So just be aware of prepositions and how they apply to time. And these will really help you as you're listening for the correct answers in the listening section. And the last type of word I just want you to be aware of are words that I kind of call extreme words. These could be adverbs or adjectives or superlatives, or words that tell you that you have to do something or must do something. And you can see some of the types of examples that I've underlined here. An adverb like mainly or usually. You don't want to listen for something that are done sometimes or seldom or rarely if you're listening for something that's usually or mainly. If it says must have good something, well, must have means it's necessary. Maybe they'll mention some other things that aren't necessary. Well, you're only listening for what you must have. So these are always good clues to help you identify and narrow down the type of answers, and will help you predict what types of answers that you're listening for. So we've discussed paying attention, controlling the pace, and predicting. One of the other things that you can do when it comes to just helping you be aware of what kind of answers you're listening for is to just make a little note. So for example, for number 1, I'm listening for a name. For number 2, for the time of day. Must have something skills, I'm listening for an adjective. A time period, maybe not a specific time, but a time period. Or when it says pay, I know I'm listening for an amount. If you find it helpful, don't hesitate to write these little notes. Just remember that when it comes to the paper-based exam, and this may be one advantage of why you should take the paper-based instead of the computer-based. You can mark it and do anything you want in the notebook, because the notebook is not going to be seen by the examiner or the marker, only your answer sheet. So you can do whatever you like to your notebook. You can mark it up and make notes in any way you like, in any way that's going to help you discover and listen for the answers that you need. So don't hesitate to mark it in any way that's going to be helpful for you, because the marker is not going to see the notebook. After your test marks are finalized, the notebook is going to end up in the garbage bin. So just realize that this notebook is for you to use in any way that's going to help you find the answers that you need. And when it comes to success on the listening exam, nothing replaces practicing. And if you want good practice tests, I suggest that you use the official IELTS websites, whether it's Cambridge, British Council, or IDP. Be careful when you're looking for resources for practicing, and stick to the official IELTS websites. And I've provided links for those official websites so that you can practice. And I wish you all the best as you continue your preparation for the IELTS exam.